PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And with me this evening, Mike Panicello, Dan Spell, both MUFON. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Great, Adam. Thank you.
Good, good. I'm glad you guys are back. Phil Scheider is the subject tonight. And like I was saying, my God, what a lot of twists and turns. An insane amount. I don't know. I usually am pretty good about having a good fix on what I think. This is the first time where I'm lost completely. What have you guys, what have you learned about him thus far?
Well, I don't know if Dan wants to go first or I can go first.
Either or.
Go ahead. Good. Give it a shot, then I'll follow.
Okay. So, he's an interesting character. I mean, if you do a Google search of him, you'll find those that support him and believe everything he says unconditionally. And then you'd find those that think he's a hoax and a disinformation person, which I guess is kind of common in our field with so-called whistleblowers, as he's kind of referred to. The thing I found interesting about this guy in his case is that, it's credible in that we know that the government has underground bases. We know that it's common for this technology to exist. It's been around since the 1940s. They've been looking into this, especially with the start of the Cold War, when the government was worried about continuity of government, that they really started investing in research and creating these elaborate underground bunkers. And just a simple search of the Army Corps of Engineers papers, which it's public domain, you can go on their website and read them, shows all kinds of different plans and schematics for these elaborate underground bases. And, whether they built them or not, that's $1 million question. People still debate that, and a lot of them are probably classified, and maybe Dan can talk a little more about that, but since he was in the government, but they're out there. And so that kind of leads credibility to what this guy is saying, that, there is this massive base there. And there's a lot of UFO sightings that are very unexplained that happen around this area. Kirkland Air Force Base is around this area. There's a hotbed of nuclear testing. Nuclear weapons were stored there. And, ufologists have documented over and over again that UFOs are interested in our nuclear arsenal. So again, it makes sense that the location, the fact that the technology exists to build something like this, are all plausible.
I agree, especially with the Cold War, which, to this day, it's hard for me to wrap my head around us being so concerned about the ideologies and the agenda of another country. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but at the end of the day, when we die, we're all the same. His case, there's things for me in this. One, in his presentation, he's very collected. I got the impression that it almost gave me the impression like he was presenting a case to his superiors, the way he was speaking in an audience. No changes in his voice tone, no signs of excitement, no fidgeting, just very left to right presentation. And it's either that he programmed himself to be that way, or he believes every word wholeheartedly. And on the flip side of the coin, like you said, he could be a misinformation individual that is, he's trained to speak that way. But then his death, and then the things surrounding his death, there's a lot of abnormalities there. What did you gather from it, Dan?
Well, my research has found 10 different claims that Phil Scheider has made. Everyone knows about the alleged firefight at the Dulce base. And he said that he was involved with a firefight with ETs down underground, and he was the only one left that knows the details of the entire operation. He claims 66 Secret Service agents, FBI, Black Berets, and others died in that firefight. That's pretty well-known legendary story of his. But some other things that he claims are that there were 129 deep underground military bases that have already been built. 129. think about the cost of that.
Yeah, that's in the trillions.
Oh, that would definitely be in the trillions. So that one gives me pause. He also claimed, based on his knowledge and work with and for the government, that for every calendar year that goes by, U.S. military technology has increased by 44.5 years. So another one that gives me pause. If that were the case, we wouldn't be using internal combustion engines to fly from here to Los Angeles. I just don't see that as being a valid claim.
I agree with that because the applications he speaks about and this is, you're talking 70s, by now would be in the public, right? We would definitely be public
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, because they could make a lot of money on that. You know, they could if you could guarantee someone an underground railway that'll move you from New York to LA in less than an hour.
Yep.
That's $1 billion corporation.
The next point that he claimed, guys, was that the federal government built 107,200 full-length railroads. And here's where it gets kind of crazy. Each of these rail cars, I'm sorry, they were rail cars that he claimed the Gunderson company out in Oregon built. He claimed that these rail cars, 107,200 of them, each had 143 pairs of shackles on them that for, I guess, to imprison people who disagreed with the government. And what he claimed was some new world order.
Yeah, that's strange.
Some of this stuff is just beyond belief. And he said that the U.S. space shuttle was moving large ingots of special metals that were milled in space because they can't be produced here on the Earth, and needed a near vacuum of space to produce them. That one, maybe a little bit more believable to me, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I imagine the way things cure in space versus here are different. I'm going to look further. I tried looking further into that, by the way, and I didn't hear a whole lot about it outside of some people from MIT, and it was still speculation, though. It wasn't like, something that they're practicing, because then again, we don't have a laboratory that, other than ISS, we don't have anything else up there. So, right. And ISS is being used internationally, so we couldn't work on, per se, black projects up there, right? So, yeah, his story is strange. Through every inch of it is strange.
There's more here. He claimed that the U.S. allowed the United Nations to use our stealth aircraft technology. That one, I cannot imagine the United States military ever doing that.
No.
Is it possible? I suppose it is, but I just don't see it.
In one of his videos, he presents an ID, and the ID, and I wrote this down because it caught my interest. It said, the Department of Air Force. Is that an actual title?
What? No, it's an organization.
Huh.
There's a Department of the Air Force, which is within the DOD, but it's not a title per se.
Yeah, these claims here. I'll let you guys listen to this real quick. Hang on.
Go ahead.
I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The person the entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the Folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and all the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walther PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. This was in late August of 1979. Now, you got a regular suit of clothes, you got a regular clothes on, plus you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it. and start shooting.
Okay, so here's where I took issue. He's lowered down in this basket into a place that he claims, if earlier in the video he says, our government's very aware of it. And so he goes down by himself. Now, why does he go? I get it. You're the engineer. You're there to supervise and make sure things are running adequately. What the hell's he doing with a Walter PPK? Right? And on top of which, why wasn't the clip not in it already?
Yes, exactly. The magazine would have been in that handgun.
You wouldn't catch me in the woods without the clip in, right? Let alone a dark tunnel with, and you know that there's something sketchy going on due to the presence of military. So I don't know. And then here's the other part. By himself, all this military presence guards. Why wasn't he escorted? Because as far as I know, the government doesn't trust anyone, right? You're not going to send some guy down there to evaluate something, and based on his word and his word alone, oh, it's fine. And/or it's not working well, without there being, a witness or something like that. So that's where I don't know. That's the roadblocks for me when I hear things like that. I mean, Mike, from a different perspective, what do you think about that part of it?
Well, I'm not an expert in law enforcement or military tactics, but I would think that if you were going into a possible hostile location, you would send in soldiers or someone to secure the location before you send the civilian in, which in this case would be him as the engineer. So it doesn't make sense that he'd be the first one to kick the door down, so to say, especially if they don't know what's going on down there. I mean, it's the same thing like with police actions. You send in the SWAT team first, they secure the location, and then the CSI investigators go in after the fact. You don't send the CSI investigators in first and let them secure the spot. So it doesn't make sense on that. But that's the thing about this guy, and that, I always think that this is the problem with ufology. You have these people that come out and they bring some stuff that's true. I mean, like, the underground bases is true and all of this. They bring in pieces that are true, and then they elaborate. I mean, even in his video, when he is showing these photos, you can't see anything. They're all in this, you can't make anything out. I don't know what any of that stuff was in the video you sent us on YouTube, or any of the YouTube videos that he's in. He shows this evidence that is unclear, very difficult to make out exactly what is being shown. And so you're like, well, this is great. You have evidence, but it's still worthless evidence. And, I think that this is why our field gets such a bad rep, because we fall for this. I agree. There are, like I said, there are parts of this that could be true. You can read a great book by a guy named Richard Sonder, PhD. He wrote a book called Underground Bases and Tunnels, What the Government is Trying to Hide. That was written in 2014, and it'll lay all of this out, that the technology is out there to create this. But you can elaborate on it any way you want. And unfortunately, there's always going to be people that are going to believe whatever someone comes out and says. So, yeah,
I mean, I stand with Dan on this. And you guys both know I have a very open mind, and I'm not a naysayer, but I tackled this subject because it's constantly being pushed in my face by people. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to leave it to myself. I'll create a panel. I know a couple of guys, and we'll evaluate it. And, I'm going to be honest, like, another roadblock for me. In part of the video, he's showing these medals that he claimed were given to him from Roswell as a kid. And then I read the report about his father, and his father was allegedly a U-boat captain who was captured by the French and eventually turned over to the Navy intel. And his father, somewhere down the line, starts working on the Philadelphia project. To me, that's all really fantastic. What a pedigree. And so how did he end up being in the position he was in? And then his position where it goes from building bases for government safety turns into a firefight with aliens. So if you look at the entire storyline, there's a lot of holes. Why was he so privileged to get those medals, and who gave him those medals? And then he claims that the alien presence was, as far as he knows, from the 1940s and just prior, whatever it may be. And then later on in his same video, he says he believes they've been around for almost 500,000 years.
Yeah, but I'm not saying I believe him. I think he's lying. I think he's a fabricator. But what I'm saying is that this is so typical, and this is what should be so frustrating to us as ufologists, that people take bits and pieces that are of true information and then mold it into this fabrication. I mean, if there's a photo of him online showing the scar that he got when he was supposedly shot by that beam. It looks like an open heart scar, when you have open heart surgery. Did anyone ever look at his medical history? Did he ever have open heart surgery?
Yeah, I tried finding that stuff, by the way, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
You're right. I didn't see the image of the scar in his chest. Was it proper, like, horizontal?
Well, it's a Pinterest. I found it on Pinterest. Again, it could be photoshopped, but I found it on several different websites of different times when he's raised his shirt to show what has happened to his body. Right. And there's a scar going right through him, but it's big. But it could be any common reason for that. Any medical reason could have caused that.
Very
scar
true. Plus, I mean, there's two sides of the coin for him on this. He's filleted by what he claimed to be a controlled energy or lightning. And if it does do that, I could see it cauterizing and you don't bleed out. Because if you get sliced like that with let's say a sword, you're dead. There's no surviving. The Green Beret did not pull you in. You don't make it. You're wide open, bleeding like crazy, especially in that, you're talking about center mass. But if it's something of high energy, maybe cauterize it. But it's so fantastic to me to hear that, because it's like, I don't know. And watching his videos, he's so, like, he's collected. And that, for me, again, when I hear people, Dan said it, I've heard a few others say it, you said it, he could be an agent of misinformation. And I think the UFO, and you're right, this is where it's tough for the ufology. Are they real? Most certainly. Our government has got the video. We know they're flying. We know that they're moving greatly. We don't know what they are exactly, but they exist. And then you have stories like this where the UFOs are a great scapegoat for the government, in my opinion. Right? It's fantastic. Well, if we do an experiment here and someone notices or whatever, maybe we'll just say UFO. And then we'll deny UFO, and by us denying UFO, then it's definitely UFO in the eyes of the public, right? So that could be one end of it. But Dan, in the military, he was describing his ID, which I kind of fact checked it a little bit. It does have some weight to it, minus the idea of the retina scan. We're talking 1995, and I have no idea if that was practical use in 1995. I have no clue.
Not sure, because each location has a different type of security involved in it. I mean, nuclear related facilities certainly have a different type of security than we had at Fort Meade. So, I can't really say whether he's telling the truth about that or not. Right.
Yeah, that's a tough one. His death is most certainly mysterious. There's no question in that. He allegedly, they tried offing him, right? They tried running him off the road. They shot him with succession in his shoulder.
That's the legend, that he was harassed by unknown people and that he was found dead. And the coroner and the authorities said it was by suicide. But the people who knew him claimed that there's no way that he did that. He was not physically capable of tying the ligature around his own neck tight enough to kill himself.
Plus, he was in a chair, I believe, with the strangulation. And and every time I read about it, here's a problem with this, especially from the 90s. I haven't found a consistent report or story. They all lead to the idea that he was strangulated and/or hung, or but there's no consistency to, what. Like when I talk to detectives on this show, you hear the story laid out, right? Because there's that chain of command with a report,
right?
And when you have that chain of command, no matter how the report's found via the web, you could tell a difference between what someone wants to make sensational versus what the report shows. And his is all over the place. It's just all over the place. It's insanity. So I don't know. There's other, like, especially the part about his father being a U-boat captain. I can't find anything on that either. It's sad. And I put a lot of time into looking at it. I don't know. Like he says, you know, the nuclear test, this is what Mike was talking about. He has these photographs where I guess it's depicting unknown objects around nuclear test sites, but in the images he's showing, I don't see anything. All right, it looks like poor quality film.
What puzzles me about it, guys, is that his dad, believe his name was Otto, was supposed to be a U-boat captain for the Third Reich, and then he transitions into the U.S. Navy, where he's doing extremely technical things. Generally, a U-boat captain was not that type of, it was just a different type of person that commanded a U-boat than would be doing research into the things that he supposedly did. I don't see the matchup. The Germans would never have allowed him to command a U-boat if he was that brilliant.
I agree with that. I know what you mean. I'll tell you where I think he got that from. Fact. We did take some Germans that were good with rockets, bring them over to us, which helped us excel in our program.
Von Braun is one of them.
Right. So, but that was their expertise, is building rockets. This guy's a U-boat captain. To your point, yeah. Why did we need him for intelligence purposes other than the giveaway position? And outside of that, he has no reason to work on a Philadelphia project.
Well, I think that's where you come back to my point that, it's so typical. He takes something that's true, Project Paperclip, where German scientists were brought over, and we brought over hundreds, maybe thousands. I don't remember off the top of my head how many, but we brought a lot over. That's all true. But then you spin it, and because most of the Project Paperclip files at the time were classified, there's really no way to prove it. And that's probably what you're running into now, because, there's a lot out there on Project Paperclip, but there's still a lot that's classified. And so it's one of those stories where it's in the gray and he can get away with it. And that's so common. That's so common with these type of witnesses. They run in the gray. It could be true. It could not be true. But as Dan said, if you had that expertise, you'd be on land doing something for the Germans and not command, because that was a very risky position to be in as a U-boat captain. The mortality rate for U-boat captains and crew were extremely high. They took a lot of losses, especially once the convoy system started and the Allies got better at sinking them in the North Atlantic. They took huge casualties. So if you had someone with that kind of smarts, for lack of a better way of saying it, you would not risk their life as a U-boat captain.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. If we had a guy that could cure the coronavirus altogether, we would definitely not have him in a fighter jet, right? Oh. He's valuable with his knowledge. I get hit with a lot of stuff. So I did a lot of the off-air interviews and the back and forth on some of these sites, and someone said that I guess it's speculation, because I still haven't confirmed. Did he work for the government? I have no idea. I don't have the resources to find that out, other than the University of YouTube. But what they did say to me is that it's very possible, very likely, that if he did work for the government, and for their words, they brainwashed him, and he started making these claims, and they made him believe through brainwashing that these things happen, so he didn't know the difference between the lie and the reality, because he was brainwashing. And then what ended up happening is this is the part where I lose it, though. They had me at that part, but when they say, and then they killed him because he started remembering, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think so. And Dan, backman us. I'd like to believe if our government wanted you dead, you're gone, and there's no newspaper heading.
No, I think that's true. If they really had a need, they would do it.
Yeah. I mean, for crying out loud, we struck a guy in Iran with a precision bomb, a precise bomb. And now you're talking about someone stateside in the 90s where there's really not everyone walking around today with a camera. I think that guy disappears rather than hung or whatever it may be. I think the sad part of that case for me, I think, because I started to evaluate it, is that I think it was a homicide, and I think he was a homicide by someone who wanted to supposedly back his claims and make it look more fantastic than what it was, or he plotted that. I don't know. This story's tough. That's why when I presented you guys, like, all right, I need more minds on this one because I don't know what direction to go in with it. But yeah, what Mike said, especially about the father. So I'm officially going to say, or at least for me, in my own mind, I don't think his father was either a U-boat captain, nor do I believe he worked on the Philadelphia project, because he's nowhere in records. And this other piece here. Yeah. Specialized in underground bases. I still don't understand the part why he's going down there by himself. Let's say there's no alien threat. What is he doing going down there without an escort? Like I said before, our government's pretty big on supervision. And then there's that thing about chain of command. Then you're talking about $1 trillion project they're trusting one person with? I don't think so. I think a team goes down to evaluate. I think they go down with guard if need be. So
I agree with you completely.
Did you guys hear about, he said this other story about, I forgot the name, where we were chasing banshees some long time ago, 1800s maybe, and they came across a cave and there were gray aliens and flying discs in it. And how did he know that? Who told him that story? Where did that information come from? You're talking about an era where they were still using primitive writing utensils and paper and not doing a great job of documenting. So those are some of the things I'm gonna try to investigate further, especially when I do the documentary. To his credit, though, what I was talking about doing a documentary, I looked into Dulce where he was, and to his credit, there are a lot of big military presence. On top of which, one portion of it is controlled by Native Americans, where in both cases the average civilian is not welcomed. So that's to his credit. So I'm on the fence about that.
Yeah, but that's common knowledge. I mean, everyone knows that there's bases there. You can just drive by and see the bases. As for the reservation, the Native American reservation, again, common knowledge. There's nothing spectacular about that. Right. So there's no credit to him on that.
Well, for me at that point, because you're talking, I didn't know anything about Dulce till before this podcast. I didn't really look too deep into ufology, and like I said, as a kid I was interested. 2017 rolls around, the videos come out, I'm interested. So everything people learned long ago, I'm just learning. And so when I hear Dulce, New Mexico, and I hear there's an air base there, well, that's no surprise. That's a wide open place. It sounds perfect for them to test and touch and goes, do some tests. That makes sense. I didn't realize the Native Americans were almost backed up to their property. That I didn't know. So the only reason I say to his credit, that those things exist. Now, was he there? I don't know. Because then he claims S4, and that's not even in the same neighborhood. And I don't know. Like, it's all right. So this guy here says, this is an off podcast. He referenced a movie called Core that was made in the 70s that fictionally utilized the same technology he discussed about the, drilling the holes. And so I had to look at clips and watch part of it. And yeah, that exists. So did he get some of that from a movie? Very likely. So moving from there, Dan and Mike, we both got a strong idea that the Phil Scheider thing, I lean nay on that. I have to. The only things that ever gave me any kind of reason to believe him is because he's very collected and his story didn't really alter, although it contradicted itself, in the timelines. And I imagine you guys feel the same on that. But moving forward from that, I'm also reading there's another disclosure coming up from our government. Have you guys heard anything about that?
I have not. Nothing.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine, and it could be, I don't know if it's a disclosure or not. I think it's more like an in the know or maybe a a Q&A, but it's supposedly coming by 2022 of January. What is it? Yeah, I think it's a Q&A. I think it's just going to be more of what we know already, and they're going to maybe elaborate on it. And what is there to elaborate on? It's just flying around. You don't know what it is. But I don't know. So right now for me, I mean, are you guys in agreement with that? Phil Scheider, possibly a nay?
I agree to that.
I think what may have happened with Phil Scheider, and of course I never got to meet him or anything. I think there may be some kernel of truth to what he experienced, and then he started telling his story, and then as time went on, he felt the need to make it more interesting than it probably actually was, and he got caught up in it, and he lost control of his own story, and it became probably a lot of fabrication with some kernel of truth to it.
I have to agree with that. You on board with that, Mike?
Sure, I'll go with that.
Yeah, but the problem is, what is that kernel of truth? What is real and what is not?
I think from the way he speaks, and did he work on tunnels, or did he have an engineering background? Possibly, because he does. He's definitely utilizing language I would otherwise not use in his speeches anyway. But that could be learned. Well, there wasn't YouTube in 1995. Today, you can learn anything like that. Then, I don't know. So the colonel, yeah, perhaps maybe, or the truth could be he visited there, observed, and keep in mind, Dulce, New Mexico, Nevada, when we're testing our stuff, we're testing it over those wide areas that are, for the most part, remote. Did he witness something fantastic and his mind ran away? Possibly. Mm-hmm. But here's a big one, too. Are there any records of him? Like, I can't find a single thing stating he was what he said he was. Government, nothing speaking to his education, nothing. I can't find any of it. And usually with the all-knowing University of Google, you can find these things, somewhat of it anyway. But all I hear is claims, and that puts me back in position one. So I hate being in position one. I like knowing. It's like I was telling Mike when I first met him, I can't watch a show and not finish the series. I got to know, or else it'll drive me crazy. So
yeah, I think what might have happened with him, why there wasn't more research into his story, is because he died. He wasn't on the stage for very long, and is more of the out of sight, out of mind. And now he's just part of the legend, the myth of ufology, and people talk about him, but you have to really dig to find information on him. Whereas some of the more current whistleblowers that are still on the stage, they're in the public's eye, and so they get more attention. And I think that's probably why there's not much research going on to his story, because he's been dead a long time. I don't know if this new generation, the younger generation, even know who he is. The older generation does, our generation, but I think that's the reason why he's kind of just left as an interesting whistleblower, supposedly, and that's kind of where they stop. And the blogs and the research is kind of, it does hit that dead end. It doesn't dig much deeper. I think if he lived and continued on talking for another couple years, or even today, there'd be a lot more information on him. And similarly, like what happened with Travis Walton and stuff, he's still in the public stage. They're still looking into his story, even though, I think a lot of people agree on it, but that's my point. I think that's why you're hitting a wall in finding information on this particular individual.
I agree with that. Yeah. You're right. Travis Walton's very well documented. And he is on the stage because people are still interested in learning. And, even like me, you evolve the way you think, especially as you get older and wisdom starts setting in. Travis Walton, he was a victim of his own doing, right? Just like I will be. He saw something fantastic on the ground. He ran at it, and the price was paid, and they were obligated to fix him. Just like if you were, like I said, just a lot. When we're watching animals in the wild for a documentary, we can't get involved no matter what. Animals fight, the cubs are being killed by a predator. You can't get involved. But if you hit it with your truck, You're obligated because it's not natural to nature. You're there to observe, and you injured that animal. You better believe you got to fix it. Best medical attention possible. I think in Travis' case, that's what happened. In my case, one day, if I come across a UFO, that's what's going to happen because I'm going to run up. I got to see it firsthand. As far as him, I think you're right. I think if he were around today, I think it would have been interesting to see if his story held, its ground. Because, Bob Lazar's story, not only did it hold its ground, but some of the stuff he depicted in the 80s, 90s is I basically how they're performing as we're watching them. He said back then, the belly up is how they go fast. And so pretty much everything he said, when you observe these videos, sounds about right. Almost even the descriptions he laid out, for the most part anyway. For you, what story? All right, let's go down this road. We'll start with Mike Panicello. What story in history, ufology, caught your absolute attention, and to this day you stand behind it?
I think Roswell. I think that there's been enough research by Tom Carney. His 2 books are seminal works. The documenting the witness testimony, and then Stanton Friedman, his work in documenting Roswell. I think something happened there. The inconsistencies with what the government has said over the years and trying to cover it up with the Project Mogul and the weather balloons and the dummies and so on and so forth. And then I think that's something happened that day. So I think that was still going to be our best documented case for me. I'll go with Roswell.
Okay. Dan, what about you?
I think Roswell is probably the one that immediately comes to mind for most people, the most well documented. There's also several years before that, a case in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Doesn't get anywhere near the publicity of Roswell.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've never heard of that. By all means, tell me.
A craft supposedly crashed near Cape Girardeau, and there was at least one entity that was retrieved from the crashed object, and they gave it a minister was called out, and they gave him the creature the last rites, and they buried him there. And like Roswell, the military came out and hauled whatever it was away. But you don't hear much about that case. But it was right before Roswell.
Oh yeah, I think I did. Something about, or maybe it's something different I'm thinking about. Something long before we had flying craft.
You're thinking of Aurora, Texas, I think.
Yeah, where they buried a body. It was an unnamed grave.
Right.
They gave that alien or person last rites as well, and then they buried him.
All right, so that's why it sounded familiar. Okay. Yeah, I never gave that. That's probably something I want to dig into next. The next episode we all do together, we're going to each of us pick our own subject, get familiar with it, and then let's see what we come with in collaboration. All right.
Great idea.
Sure.
For me, the biggest story, ufology, that tells me there's something more than what meets the eye, was Barney and Benny Hill. And I say this because in that era, you're thinking this is an interracial couple in an era where it was frowned upon and so on and so forth. And I think, what did they have to gain from this? And I didn't see any pluses for there. Right. I always weigh things in the plus and minuses of what you're claiming. And so I would, if I'm Barney, I live then, I'm in an interracial couple. I don't want attention. It's already bad enough. People suck. So for them to come out and talk about it, I don't know I think more negatives came out for them. So they didn't really gain from that. And then you hear about Barney's life thereafter. I'd spoken with Kathleen Martin. She was on the show. She's a direct descendant of Betty.
Right.
And MUFON and wrote books, and she was fantastic to talk to. And I hear her side of it, and I hear the side of Betty and Barney, and I don't see any positives that came from that. And another thing that gave me, and why that case drew me out and gives me the attention, is Betty describes a star system, even draws it up, unidentifiable in that time. not till later on when technology increases and we actually find this thing, that it lined up with something she'd drew years and years prior.
And she was no astronomer either. How could she possibly have known that?
Right. Yeah, her education was minimal at best. Definitely, we said not an astronomer. So that gives me validity. That gives me strength to believe, because everything about that story tells me that they're being honest. Every bit of it. And Barney's disposition and the mental fatigues that weighed upon him. And he had to go through a hypnotic regression to confront it, which ended up kind of blown up in his face. And I understand why I did it. If I lost time and something fantastic happened to me, I would want to know too. I wouldn't rest well till I knew. But then there's the other side of that card. What if you find out it's something so disturbing it ruins the remainder of your days? So yeah, for me, that story that grabs me.
Yeah, that is a very compelling story, no question.
So yeah, I think I'm gonna, not that I can look any further into that, but I'm gonna begin talking to experiencers, people that have been, or claim abduction, and in a perfect world, I'll have 3 of them on. And at the same time, I'm going to vet 3 of them separately, but have them on at the same time, because obviously I'm going to vet them according to the lining of what they've discovered or what they learned or what they've been through, and just hear their stories out and figure out what it is they went through, and then what they believe they learned from it. Because everyone has to learn from something. Like Travis Walton learned. His perspective has definitely evolved since it happened. I mean, he was angry toward him in the beginning, and then in hindsight realized that, well, maybe I shouldn't have ran at this thing and I wouldn't have gotten hurt, and then they wouldn't have to take me aboard and fix me. Right. I would like to think that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so in the upcoming future here, we'll do another episode. Each of you pick your own subject and we'll cover it, and we'll find out what conclusions we come to.
Yeah, so that sounds great.
Sounds good. Sounds like a fun project.
Indeed. Perfect. Dan, anything you want to add in before we close?
No, I think that's it for the evening. Thank you, guys.
Not a problem. Mike, you as well?
No, I think I'm good. I had fun talking with both of you, and this was a stimulating conversation, so I enjoyed it.
Perfect.
It was indeed. Happy holidays, guys.
Happy holidays, gentlemen. That's
Yes,
right.
Happy holidays.
We'll talk soon. You guys have a good night.
You too. See you
Thanks, you
next
too.
time.
Take care.
Good night.